This segment has given us all-time great quotes from the entire series, and this segment is some of the best 8 minutes of the entire history of The Simpsons. What's up, boils and ghouls? If you're anything like me, not only do you love Halloween and spend the Halloween season watching a bunch of horror movies, but you also probably grew up on The Simpsons and know that no Halloween season is complete until you watch all your favorite episodes of the Treehouse of Horror. I know I started to lose interest in Treehouse of Horror once it got into the double-digit seasons, and I don't think I'm alone in that. However, having since gone back and paid more attention to those installments, there's lots of really good stuff in there. So even though today I could be spending this whole video talking about how incredible all the segments from the first 10 installments of Treehouse of Horror are, I'm going to try and highlight some that also come in later seasons. Before getting into my list of my 13 favorite segments, I'd like to do the requisite. Please like, please subscribe, please comment, please like me, please tell YouTube that I'm cool. Now with that out of the way, here are my 13 favorite segments from the Treehouse of Horror. Terror at 5.5 feet. Treehouse of Horror 4. This is an adaptation of the classic Richard Matheson's short story Terror at 20,000 Feet that was adapted into an episode of The Twilight Zone. I was more familiar with the Twilight Zone episode than I was the short story, so I just thought this was a parody of The Twilight Zone. And it is a very funny one at that, where Bart thinks he sees a gremlin on the side of the school bus. One of my favorite moments is when he's screaming about a gremlin on the side of the bus, and then you look on the side of the bus, and Hans Moleman is driving a gremlin. Also, Martin wears a shirt that says Wang Computers. The Shinning. Treehouse of Horror 5. This segment has given us all-time great quotes from the entire series, and this segment is some of the best 8 minutes of the entire history of The Simpsons. From the title alone and how the fact that groundskeeper Willie can't save the Shining because he doesn't want to risk any sort of lawsuit, the jokes only get better from there. Whether it be Homer's no TV and no beer make Homer something something, to the replication of the Here's Johnny scene, but with David Letterman. There's lots of great jokes in here. And on top of that, it's just a fun parody of The Shining. Time and Punishment. Treehouse of Horror 5. This is a time travel story that opens with Homer reflecting on how much he loves his family, only for Lisa to casually let him know that his hand is in a toaster. That is the level of absurdity we're talking about when we're talking about this segment. It's ultimately a butterfly effect story about Homer going back in time and accidentally making all of these changes to the past that impact his present. It's a great symphony between creative writing and creative animation, because we see all of the worlds that these scripts are telling the animators to come up with, whether it be Ned Flanders becoming a supreme leader, or a world in which when it rains, it's actually donuts falling from the sky. There's lots of great scripted jokes and sight gags in this time travel story. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, Treehouse of Horror 6. As you can tell by the name, this is a Nightmare on Elm Street parody, but rather than Freddy Krueger, it's groundskeeper Willie that is haunting the Springfield children's nightmares. Even though I'm not a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan, I appreciate how faithful the filmmakers at The Simpsons were when it came to touching on all the important elements of the character's backstory. They even kill groundskeeper Willie in a boiler room, which is pretty disturbing to include in an animated series, but it shows the lengths that the filmmakers were going to. The segment also gave us the line, lousy smarch weather. The Thing and I, Treehouse of Horror 7. This story sees Bart and Lisa thinking they're hearing things in their house, specifically their attic, only for us to all learn that Bart is one half of a set of twins that were conjoined at birth. One is evil, one is good, and we're led to believe that Hugo, the twin that is living in the attic and surviving on fish heads, is the evil one. However, there's a very funny twist towards the end of this segment that confirms Bart is actually the evil one and Hugo was the good one. While this segment is funny enough in its own right, the reason why it really resonates with me is that the idea of someone living in your house without you knowing it, also known as frogging, is terrifying. So this one really sticks out with me, not just for how funny it is, but also just for how creepy the concept is. The Omega Man, Treehouse of Horror 8. This is a parody of The Omega Man or The Last Man on Earth or I Am Legend, however you're most familiar with this story. And it shows Homer surviving a nuclear apocalypse that either kills the rest of Springfield or turns them into mutants. This one's fun not only because it's a parody on an iconic story, but also it just really lets Homer completely let loose and do whatever the hell he wants and just get away with it, whether it's dancing naked in a church or going to the movie theater or whatever the hell he wants to do. There's also a great bit where Homer doesn't realize the town's been turned to corpses and he goes and punches Kirk Van Houten's head and it explodes because it's a corpse. Easy Bake Coven, Treehouse of Horror 8. This is a story in which the Salem witch trials are replicated as old-timey Springfield, where Marge, Patty, and Selma are a trio of witches. Given that the original Salem witch trials of Salem Town and Salem Village was all about paranoia and rivalries within these communities where people could accuse one another of being a witch or practicing witchcraft just so that people they didn't like were punished. This segment really focuses on the entire town of Springfield. So even though Marge, Patty, and Selma are the main characters in this segment, we get all sorts of appearances from our favorite residents of Springfield. The end also reveals that the events of this episode laid the groundwork for various traditions related to Halloween, such as decorating or trick-treating and that sort of thing. So as someone who loves The Simpsons and loves the history of Halloween, it just touches all the notes that I'm looking for in a Treehouse of Horror episode. Night of the Dolphin, Treehouse of Horror 11. This story sees Lisa freeing a dolphin that she sees at an aquarium because she knows that it is inhumane to keep the dolphin there. And when that dolphin is freed, it meets up with the rest of its friends and family, and they vow vengeance against humanity. This episode really goes to show that from the start of a segment to the end, you really have no idea what direction it's going to go. Because it's about animals who live in the water attacking humanity, there's some funny Jaws references in there, so I really appreciated that. And ultimately, it's just a fun creature feature using dolphins who are so playful and majestic in a very violent way. There's also a line where Mayor Quimby is addressing the townspeople where he gets their attention by saying, people, I know we're all frightened and horny. Reaper Madness, Treehouse of Horror 14. The premise for this one is simple because it's what if Homer had to become the Grim Reaper? Since Homer's not necessarily the most responsible character in The Simpsons, all sorts of wackiness ensues. When Homer has the powers of the Grim Reaper and the touch of death, as you can imagine, he uses that power for his own well-being as opposed to for the reasons he's supposed to use it. So whether it's to cut to the front of the line or make his way through a crowd, there's lots of very disturbingly hilarious uses of Homer's touch of death. There's also a gag where the Grim Reaper is not doing their job, so nobody is dying, and we get a very dark and disturbing joke about how Moe is unable to kill himself because the Grim Reaper is off duty. And it just goes to show how funny the Simpsons writers can be with some of the most disturbing subject matter imaginable. You gotta know when to Golem. Treehouse of Horror 17. The story of the Golem is about a clay figure that when you write commands on a slip of paper and put them in its mouth, it does those commands. I wasn't super familiar with the folklore of the Golem when I first saw this segment, but now afterwards I have a much better appreciation for how clever this story is. It just goes to show how creative the storytellers at The Simpsons were in how they're drawing influences from all sorts of source material, including centuries-old myths about the Golem. The segment guest stars Richard Lewis, and it also has Fran Drescher voicing a character. And I think one of my favorite gags is that the timing of this segment is when all the TV networks were transferring over to HD programming. And when we see Krusty the Clown in HD programming, we realize he should not be seen in HD. E.T. Go Home, Treehouse of Horror 18. This segment is just a parody of E.T., but instead of a cute, cuddly alien, it is Kodos. I think I just really appreciate how faithful this story is to the source material, touching on all the necessary plot points of the original E.T., but of course with Kodos. At one point, Homer refers to Kodos as a space doggy, so I really love that. And this segment even uses John Williams' score. So for fans of E.T., this segment touches all the notes you'd hope for. It's the Grand Pumpkin Millhouse. Treehouse of Horror 19. Mainly, I'm surprised that The Simpsons waited almost 20 years before doing a parody of It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. As you can tell from the title, it is The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, except this time the Grand Pumpkin actually shows up and then sees how people celebrate Halloween, which is by carving up a bunch of pumpkins as sacrifices to the Grand Pumpkin. The Grand Pumpkin goes on a rampage and eventually even fights Tom the Turkey. Not only do I love this segment because it's a darker spin on the classic Peanuts story, but I also really just love how the Springfield kids look in this Charlie Brown art style because it blends together the Peanuts art style of the original special with the Simpsons art style. So it really just gives me everything I want out of animation. Dial M for murder or press pound to return to main menu. Treehouse of Horror 20. As you can tell by the name, this is a tribute to Hitchcock. It's not a parody of Dial M for Murder, it's actually a parody of Strangers on a Train. And this time we get to see Bart and Lisa both offering to kill someone on behalf of the other person, but Bart is the only one who actually goes through with it. Outside of being a parody of that storyline, this whole segment is just a tribute to Hitchcock. From the black and white animation to using musical cues from Psycho, you get everything you want out of a Hitchcock tribute done in the style of The Simpsons. So those are my picks for my 13 favorite segments from the history of Treehouse of Horror. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you thought of my picks, or if there are segments that I left out that you can't believe I left out. Also, be sure to like and subscribe and do all those things that lets YouTube know that I should keep making content. But most importantly, happy Halloween.